1968, George Romero brought us Night of the Living Dead. It became the classic horror film of its time. Now, George Romero brings us the most intensely shocking motion picture experience for all times. Dawn of the Dead. Night of the Living Dead has ended. Dawn of the Dead is here.
It gets up and kills. The people it kills get up and kill.
They must be destroyed on sight.
When there is no more room in hell, the dead will walk the earth. Dawn of the Dead.
Greetings, fellow horror aficionados. Today we'll be taking a look at the iconic horror classic Dawn of the Dead, directed by George A. Romero and released in 1978. I was a latecomer to this movie. I saw it for the first time in 1997 when I was in my early teens. Although I joined the party late, it still left a hell of an impression. Prior to seeing Dawn of the Dead, Dan O'Bannon's 1985 classic Return of the Living Dead was the king of zombie movies to me. Dawn of the Dead quickly rose the ranks and became a contender for my coveted greatest zombie movie ever title. As it stands today, I can't pick a favorite between the two. They both bring unique qualities to the table that allow each movie to sit comfortably at the top spot together. Dawn of the Dead is the second in Romero's classic Living Dead series, preceded by Night of the Living Dead and followed up by Day of the Dead. Well, there's also these, but we'll just ignore these. It's for the best, trust me. Dawn of the Dead has stood the test of time and has become a cornerstone of the zombie genre. Without further ado, let's get into it. The film opens with a thrilling news broadcast detailing the rapid spread of the zombie outbreak and the chaos that has ensued. This opening is awesome and immediately establishes the turmoil society is in and creates a lot of survival tension right from the start. We are introduced to half of our main protagonists, Fran and Steven. They are planning on escaping by stealing the WGON helicopter. We immediately meet the other half of our protagonists, Peter and Roger. They're part of a SWAT team clearing out this tenement building. This scene is pretty brutal. It's a non-stop gore fest. Roger reveals to Peter that he was plotting an escape with some friends and invited him to tag along. Fran and Steven make it to the docks to refuel the helicopter and wait for Roger. Some rogue police show up who are planning an escape of their own. They briefly consider taking the helicopter for themselves. The situation de-escalates quickly when Roger and Peter show up and start flashing their guns around. The cops choose to stick with the boat as they had planned. One of them is played by the late great Joe Pilato, who played Rhodes in Day of the Dead. A cool little fan theory is that this character is actually Rhodes. He was a Philadelphia policeman who eventually became a soldier. I always liked this idea. I wonder if this guy ever found some cigarettes. They have several close calls during a stop for fuel at some abandoned airplane hangars. This is the Harold W. Brown Memorial Field, aka the Monroeville Municipal Airport. It was still in operation as of 2013. It has since closed. Here's some footage showing the area before it was torn down. This airfield is approximately 10 miles from the Monroeville Mall, which is our next stop and the main location for the movie. The group land on the rooftop of the Monroeville shopping mall. The group decides to make the mall their new home, using it as a base to scavenge for supplies and weapons. The mall setting is a stroke of genius by Romero, as allows him to comment on the excesses of consumer culture and the emptiness of modern society. The survivors indulge in the luxuries and excesses of the mall while the zombies mindlessly roam the corridor, mirroring the mindless consumerism that plagues our society. It also represents some escapist fantasy. Who hasn't dreamt of being able to live in a mall and have everything in it at your disposal? Ultimately, the mall would prove to be their downfall. They devise a plan to stay in the mall permanently. Roger and Peter set out to block the mall entrances with trucks to keep the zombies from getting in. This involves driving through crowds of zombies outside who constantly attempt to enter the trucks to get to Peter and Roger. Roger survives a particularly dangerous encounter and becomes reckless as a result. He is soon bitten by the zombies. Later, with an injured Roger in tow, the group seals off the doors from the inside of the mall and clear it of all remaining zombies inside. Peter and Steven camouflage the entrance to the stairwell, which leads to their safe room upstairs. This becomes important later. The special effects in Dawn of the Dead can be a mixed bag for some people. Tom Savini has definitely created some of the most memorable zombie designs in cinematic history, and the scenes of the zombies feasting on human flesh are pretty graphic and impressive for the time. Most of the zombies had this comedic blue-gray complexion, and the look of the blood was pretty cartoonish. The color of the zombies was Tom Savini's choice, since Night of the Living Dead was filmed in black and white, and the zombie skin color was never defined, so he went with gray. But they ended up looking blue in the end. The blood they used apparently looked quite good in the bottle. It didn't photograph very well, unfortunately, and according to Savini, it looked like melted crayons. Romero was happy with the final result. He said it fit the film's comic book style. The extras in the movie were given $1, a donut, and a Dawn of the Dead t-shirt. I probably would have been happy with that. After clearing the mall's interior of zombies, the four are able to live out the mall fantasy with all the goods available to them, furnishing their safe room with the mall's many commodities. Roger eventually succumbs to his wounds and dies. When he reanimates as a zombie, Peter shoots him in the head and later buries his body in the mall. The zombies and the gore wasn't the standout feature of this movie for me. It was a very character-driven movie that explores the psychological toll of living in a world overrun by the undead. The characters are well developed, with each facing their own challenges and moral dilemmas as they try to survive in the zombie apocalypse. The slow transformation of Roger as he succumbs to the zombie infection is particularly poignant, adding a sense of urgency and tragedy to the group's situation. Sometime later, all emergency broadcast transmissions cease, suggesting that the outside world is totally collapsed. Stephen and Fran have a tense squabble over the TV. Everyone is beginning to break down. Fran is the only one that sees the mall for what it is, and the negative effect it's having on everyone. She's eager to leave, while Stephen and Peter want to stay. This scene is a turning point for the group, where now even Stephen and Peter are recognizing the damage being done. That maybe the mall is no longer the haven they once thought it was, and perhaps moving on would be best. The next scene we see Fran and Stephen loading supplies into the helicopter. Fran also gets Stephen to teach her how to fly it in case something happens to him. A roaming biker gang comes across the mall and sees Fran and Stephen messing around in the helicopter. Later that night, they decide to assault the mall. The bikers avoid having to move the trucks by shooting the lock to the bay door. This provides a large opening, allowing them and their motorcycles free passage inside, as well as a giant pile of zombies. Despite having a place to hide from the assailants, Stephen allowed his territorial greed to get the better of him, and he begins attacking the bikers, thus putting himself and Peter in the crosshairs of the gang. The bikers looted what they could and escaped with all they could carry. Those left behind were either dispatched by Peter and Stephen or promptly eaten by the zombies. At one point, Stephen takes refuge in the elevator shaft, but gets shot and subsequently mauled by lurking zombies. Stephen reanimates and becomes arguably the coolest looking zombie in the movie. He remembers the blocked off wall leading to the safe room and leads the zombies to Fran and Peter. Peter deals with the undead Stephen in gory fashion. Fran escapes to the roof, while Peter, not wanting to leave, offers himself up as bait to allow her time to get out. He locks himself in a room and plans to use his Derringer on himself before the zombies can get to him. The zombies burst in, and he decides this isn't how he really wants to go out and fights his way up to the roof, where he jumps into the helicopter with Fran. They take off at the break of dawn, leaving the mall behind them, low on fuel and no particular destination in mind. What happened to our surviving heroes? Well, no one really knows. Surviving characters in Romero's dead movies don't carry over to the next movie, so it's hard to say what happened to them exactly. The soundtrack for Dawn of the Dead is a hauntingly effective and memorable accompaniment to the film's unforgettable visuals. Composed by the brilliant Italian band Goblin, who just the year prior to Dawn of the Dead did the equally incredible soundtrack to Dario Argento's Suspiria. Goblin's use of synthesizers, percussion, and eerie vocalizations create an atmosphere of dread and tension that perfectly complements Dawn of the Dead's apocalyptic storyline. One of the standout tracks on the soundtrack is the main theme, which features an unforgettable melody played on a hauntingly beautiful synthesizer that has become iconic in its own right, instantly recognizable to fans of the film. The use of the synthesizer throughout the soundtrack gives it a distinctly 70s feel that perfectly captures the mood and atmosphere of the film, while also ensuring that it remains an enduring classic of horror film soundtracks. The goofy-sounding gonk theme written by British composer Herbert Chappell is another standout that would later be used as the end credits theme for the TV show Robot Chicken. The song always plays in my head when I'm walking around a mall. My personal favorite might be the song titled Zombie. The blend of awesome bassline, killer percussion, and synthesizers make it the perfect 70s action tune. The intro to the song almost sounds like Metallica, if they were a progressive 70s rock band instead of thrash. Beyond its visceral horror and character-driven storytelling, Dawn of the Dead is also an important social and political commentary. Romero uses the zombie apocalypse as a metaphor for society in collapse, highlighting the breakdown of social norms and the dangers of unchecked consumerism. The film's themes are still relevant today, making it a timeless classic. Alright, let's wrap up this review. Dawn of the Dead is a masterpiece of the horror genre, blending gore, character development, and a social commentary into a truly unforgettable cinematic experience. It is definitely a must-watch for any horror fan, and its influence can be seen in countless films that have followed in its footsteps. George A. Romero's vision and Tom Savini's special effects work have ensured its place in cinematic history, and it will continue to terrify and captivate audiences for generations to come. Thank you all for watching. If you have any suggestions for future reviews or anything, just leave them down in the comments below. Hope to see you here again next time on Dread Empire.